Hello, I'm Janneke Verbeek.
I'm Will Chara, and today we are going to talk about machine learning and natural language processing, and specifically how it is used to predict stock markets. Uh, First of all, let me explain to you how the firms will use machine learning and find natural language processing. So big banks like ING and all the other Goldman Sachs, they have these systems which use machine learning and natural language processing to predict out what the stock price is going to be for next day or next hour or even next second. So how does this work? So that is what we are going to address in this topic. We are going to show some techniques on how it's done. Why is it so interesting? So let us first explain why is it so interesting. Well, first let me just go through how it's going to go, the outline. First, we are going to give the introduction, and then we are going to explain some machine learning techniques. Then we will show the demo that we tried ourselves for this. Then Yonika will explain some NLP techniques, and then we will have conclusion. And after that, we'll have 5 minutes of discussion and such. So, how many of you have seen Back to the Future 2? So here's the thing. So why is this interesting? So if you remember, in Back to the Future 2, they go from 1985 to 2015, and they go. Stuff happens, and they go back, right? So here's the thing. Marty gets a sports almanac. Do you guys remember this scene? So his idea was, if he knew of all the, if he knew the results for all the sporting events from 1985 to 2015, he could bet on it and make money, right? So what these big banks have is sort of like a sports almanac in forms of computer systems using machine learning techniques and NLP. So first of all, we would like to explain some machine learning techniques. So first of all is support vectors. So the idea of support vector was first introduced by Watkins in 1995. So how it works is all the data points are all the data points are all the data points are presented into dot products on vector space. So now, for example, if I were to say you need classification, mostly vector machines are used for binary classification and you need to classify, let's say, beer and wine. So how it would work is you get two data, for example, alcohol quantity and the color of a drink. So for example, if it's red and alcohol quantity is 14, then it's wine, and otherwise it's beer. So what the vector machine does, it separates, it provides a hyperplane which separates one feature from another. For example, beer from wine. So anything above that line falls into above the line, it falls into wine, and if it is not wine, then it's obviously beer. So
for any unknown liquid you then encounter, you can you can put it into the support vector machine, and it classifies it into either wine or beer, depending on what it has learned.
Yeah, and Chaudhary and Greg used this vector machine systems to predict the stock market with 61.4% accuracy in 2008.
Which is better than chance, obviously. It's about 50%, so this is far better.
The next system is artificial neural networks. Well, artificial neural networks are computational systems consisting of interconnected units. These units have some weight, and which describes the relation between important informations. How it works is it gets some input, some information, some data, then it generates some output, and then this result, they check the output they got, was that the desirable output or was that near desirable output. If it wasn't, then all the weights are recalibrated, and then the loop goes. Then it back propagates, and the loop continues again. So that's how artificial neural network works. One of the artificial, we have a few examples of ends. First is Peng and Jian, which we will discuss later in the presentation when we talk about NLP. She will describe it. And in 2010, Balloon managed to predict Dow Jones Industrial Index with 73.3% prediction accuracy. While Dow Jones Index is obviously not the stock prices, but knowing how it is going to behave, you can sort of adjust your perception on how stocks are going to perform.
Dow Jones Industrial Average is basically an index which states how the 30 most important traders are behaving at any point.
So the linear, then we have linear regression. This is by far the most simplest and widely used machine learning technique. Even we tried it ourselves, and it works surprisingly. So how this works is basically it gives you a relation between dependent and independent variable. What do I mean by that? Well, to explain linear regression in very simplest term would be, imagine like a bottle of beer would cost, one bottle of beer costs €1, 2 bottles of beer would cost €2, 3 bottles of beer would cost €3, and so on and so forth. So given this data, you can assume that 100 bottles of beer would cost €100. So that is in the very simplistic manner on how linear regression would work. And we tried it ourselves, and this is the small code that I wrote, and it gives us, this currently gives us 90% predictability to actually 90% accuracy to predict the stock prices, which is statistically correct. But the thing is, there are many factors that affect actual real life stocks. So you cannot just bet on this and make money, unfortunately.
So I will now elaborate some natural language processing or NLP techniques, which basically are techniques for the analysis and synthesis of bodies of text. So for any body of text, you can then analyze what the meaning of the text is. For example, whether the mood of the text is good or bad. The first method I'd like to discuss is the bag of words method. It's basically a frequency analysis of words in a text. So for every word in a text, you take it, look how many times it occurs in the text, and then for every new word you find, you do this. Using this, you can generate vectors in space and use a support vector machine, which my lovely assistant here explained to you, to classify or perform linear regression of words. Now, researchers that did this were Schumacher and Chen in 2008. They took financial news articles, performed regression analysis using a support vector machine, and were able to predict stock prices with an accuracy of 57%, which is better than chance. So it could be very well be that this can be used to predict stock prices and earn quite a bit of money. They did this over a 2-week period. The next method is word embeddings, which is the mapping of words and phrases to vectors. Two researchers, Peng and Jiang, did this in 2015. For every word they generated a feature, for every new word they encountered, they generated a feature vector with a polarity score, which basically means how good or bad the word is in relation to the stock it tries to predict. Furthermore, they generated some categories, for example, good, bad, uncertain, whatever, expanded those and then categorized the words in the text into those categories to generate another vector. For this, they used news data from 2006 to 2012. They used a deep neural network to make sense of all this. And again, coincidentally, they were able to predict the market price, the stock prices with an accuracy of about 57%, which again is pretty good. The following method has not been applied to stock markets yet, but as it is pretty good at doing what it does, we would really be interested in seeing it applied to stock markets later on. It uses neural networks with some additional features, which are basically based on how the human brain works. Namely, it has an episodic memory and an attentional system. And using those features it is able to classify words into positive or negative categories really well. As a matter of fact, with an accuracy of 87.6%. So you might ask, why is this relevant? Well, it turns out that for any given piece of text, whether like the feel or the mood of the text is positive or negative has some sort of correlation with the stock prices. So using this could potentially be really interesting for future research. This leads us to our conclusion. Our research question we set out with was which NLP techniques, natural language processing and machine techniques are around, how do they work and how well do they work, basically. So we can conclude that there are quite a few techniques that can be used for the end of stock price prediction. And most of these techniques can predict the stock price with about 60% accuracy, which is a nice bridge to our discussion. We think it is probably a nice research opportunity in the future to see whether these techniques can be improved to predict stock prices even better, perhaps by combining techniques or using more sophisticated techniques to get even higher accuracies of stock price prediction.
Yeah.
Now we have a small bit on ethics, which Pharrell will handle.
And also, with as day and day, we are able to get a better hardware cheaper. It is there are already banks that are investing billions of dollars to set up the infrastructure to just do this. Well, while they might not just use these techniques as it is, they certainly improvise upon it to better fit their strategies and what kind of hardware they have available to make most efficient system possible. But it is there is this question of, is it ethical or not? So we have this United Airlines fiasco. So in 2008, what happened was some major financial news company they read an old article from 2002, which described that United Airlines is going to bankruptcy. So what happened was, all this automated system that work on natural language processing, they read the articles and they thought that this was the current article, and this automated system started selling the stocks. So what happened was, United Airlines stock prices dropped by 30%. Now 30%, that was millions and millions of dollars in value that was lost, just because of, well, you cannot say it was a faulty algorithm or bad systems, but just because there was no human interaction to stop this from happening. And there is also this big companies, these big banks, they can afford to have billions and billions of dollars to invest in to create infrastructure, but small firms can't. So like some old retirement house, people who hold money for the retirement house and their retirement savings, these small companies, they cannot compete with the big banks. So big banks sort of have this monopoly.
So those are ethical questions you could pose about this subject. And basically that was our presentation. Thank you for listening.